zum Tech-Update-Webinar der Firma Boston. Heute beschäftigen wir uns mit einem neuen Hersteller, ein Hersteller, den wir auch aktuell in dem ein oder anderen Projekt etwas näher beleuchten und auch zusammenarbeiten. Und mit der Firma Lightbits geht es heute um innovative Cloud Data Plattformen mit Nvme Tcp als intelligentes Flash-Management, also definitiv eine richtige Beschleunigung nochmal im Storage und eine sehr, sehr interessante Lösung. Und das war auch letztendlich der Grund, wo wir gesagt haben, das möchten wir natürlich Ihnen, unseren Partnern, auch nicht vorenthalten und wollen hier einfach mal ein bisschen tiefer einsteigen und Ihnen das ganze Thema etwas genauer vorstellen. Zum Vorstellen, wenn jetzt mein Slide weitergeht. So, möchte ich natürlich auch auf der einen Seite ganz herzlich begrüßen Keimpe Paulus von der Firma Lightbits Labs als Sales Director EMEA und India und Singapur, eine sehr, sehr große Region. Zusätzlich wird dieses Webinar auch unterstützt von meinem Kollegen Norbert Lindermeier. Er ist Senior Business Development Manager und wird auch noch die ein oder anderen Worte dazu beitragen. Und mich, glaube ich, kennt man inzwischen, Andreas Schlemmer. Ich bin verantwortlich für das Produktmarketing bei der Firma Boston und werde heute durch das Webinar begleiten. Zum Housekeeping, wie jedes Mal, wir werden natürlich die Präsentation im Nachgang versenden, damit Sie die Daten auch nochmal nachlesen können. Wir werden das Webinar auch aufzeichnen. Falls Sie Bedarf haben, können Sie es natürlich dann auch gerne nochmal im Nachgang ansehen. Es wird wie immer auf unserem YouTube-Channel abgeloadet und steht dann für Sie on demand bereit. Sollten Fragen aufkommen, natürlich nicht zögern, bitte direkt in den Chat einstellen. Wir werden sie aber nach dem Webinar dann alle auch bearbeiten und beantworten und wollen nur sicherstellen, dass der Ablauf des Webinars und sauber durchläuft und die Fragen, wie gesagt, werden dann im Nachgang beantwortet. Ja, wollen wir nicht viel Zeit verlieren. Ich glaube, Sie sind neugierig, was wir für Sie vorbereitet haben. Keimpe, gleich geht's an dich. Eine Information noch, wir werden auf Englisch jetzt switchen, aber wenn Fragen sind, Sie können sie natürlich auch gerne auf Deutsch einstellen, das ist gar kein Problem und wir werden sie dann entsprechend beantworten. So, Keimpe, it's your turn. I will hand over the moderation rights over to you. Just a second. So, here we go.
Yes. So I'm going to pick up my screen. Let me see. It should be this one. Show this window. So put it in slideshow mode. Can you see it?
Okay, perfect. Looks good. Thank you.
Very good. Vielen Dank, Andreas. Ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch für die Leute an die Webinar heute, aber es ist schon nicht gut für mich, in Deutsch zu sprechen heute. Es ist it's a bit limited, so let me switch already to English. Sorry about that. I will try to speak slow. You can talk German to me. I understand it very well. If you have questions now or later, and we will sort that out, of course. But I need to talk in English in order to make myself as clear as possible for this presentation today. Maybe there will be a day that I can do this fully in German. So I'm going to talk today with you about the cloud data platform that Lightbits is. And as Andreas already introduced me, I'm Keimpe Paulus. I'm here in the European region, responsible for the business development and the sales of Lightbits technology. Officially, indeed, it is EMEA, India, Singapore in the full title. To assure you, I am in the Netherlands. I'm from the Netherlands, and my primary focus is basically here in the northwestern European area. Germany is a very important region for us, so that is where we are focusing. So, together with Boston today, we are going to present you what is Lightbits, why are we here, what is the benefit, how can you benefit from what we bring and the technology that we bring, of course, and how can you use that. We will give you an example, some examples we have in store for you, and explain also how it would work in different areas. Basically, we call it a cloud data platform, as this title already says. And yeah, what we bring to the market is a next generation of data management, primarily around accessibility and availability of data. There are lots of cloud data platforms out there, of course, and you can imagine that there is several things to it. There are initiatives out there that do a lot with cloud data platforms when it comes into processing, dashboarding, showing you information. That's not what we do at Lightbits. We are a little bit supporting these kind of initiatives, as I mentioned, availability, accessibility. That is what we do. You can also see this, and that's the undertitle here, of course, as a very high performance disaggregated storage solution. And what that means, I'm going to tell you right now. So I'd like to take you first with this slide, with this explanation, a little bit alongside what is the trend that we see in the market, both from a business as well as from a technology perspective, because this gives away a little bit of why we are here and what we are doing. So first of all, and this is not news what I'm now about to tell you, there is of course a massive data growth. We know that for more than 2 decades already. I am almost 25 years in this industry, and actually I can remember that from the very start up until now, we all have seen that, we hear that all around us. Everybody is talking about it, not only storage providers, by the way. There is massive data growth, and it's still going on. Has some recent insights here from IDC that I just copied here. I can fill maybe 100 slides with all kinds of resources and research that has been done. Data growth is still here, and it is still massive. But there is something more interesting going on there. It's not only about the data growth, it is also about how do we get value from that data. That is a theme now also maybe for the last 5 years, maybe a little bit longer. Business intelligence is not new necessarily in that, but what we see in the last 5 years is an increase in demand also in getting meaningful information out of the data. So you see first the growth of data, that's a big pile of data. On top of that, there is this ever-growing demand for getting information out of that data. And we are now at a stage with that this really requires some other thinking about infrastructure, because if you want to deal with these large and increased demands of getting information out of the data, you need an infrastructure that can support that. And we believe here at Lightbits, of course, and not only us, but also a lot of analysts, that something new, something different needs to be done in that approach, because older technologies are not sufficient anymore. It's not scalable, it's costly, it is inefficient, and I'm going to show you also later in this slide a little bit more detail around that. This is one of the important business drives there, increased demand for getting meaningful data, and you need an infrastructure to support that. There are also some technology trends going on for quite some time, and that make it really interesting to establish and build on a new infrastructure. I only mentioned a few here. Commodity hardware, x86 server hardware, Boston IT really good in delivering that as part of their business. That's part of what they're doing, of course. Software-defined everything is around us now, and lots of initiatives. You have really something to choose there now, and that's really an interesting direction as well from a technology perspective. And then also to get to more efficiencies in your infrastructure, disaggregation or separation from the several elements, if that is networking, if that is compute, and now also if that is storage, that's really also one of the drivers that help you as a customer make it possible to build those more efficient infrastructures. And Lightbits is helping with that, specifically in the data domain, how to move data from A to B. We saw room in that based on these technology trends and what we saw that businesses need to invent a new way of transporting in the most efficient way how you can transport data from A to B. And we did that by inventing, first of all, a new protocol. When we started out, and I will show you the Lightbits history slide in a minute, but when we started out in 2016, we invented Nvme over TCP. What this basically means is that you are now capable of transporting very efficiently with very high performance and as equal as important in this new era, low latency as possible, transport those capabilities over just standard TCP/IP networking. Now, how can that be? A lot of people still ask. TCP/IP, that is slow, that is delaying. Totally not true. There is lots and lots of technology in there that's already there for ages, and that you can use with this Nvme Tcp protocol and make sure that you build that efficient infrastructure. And important to consider with that is that Nvme Tcp, the first thing basically what we did once we had established that, with the help of Facebook and Intel, we made it an industry standard. So it's for everybody to use. It's already for years already available from all kinds of Linux distributions, to give you an example. I'm going to explain that a little bit later too. But it basically means that Nvme Tcp is now in the possession of everybody, for everybody to use. It's basically open source. So what is it what we do on top of that then? After that invention and after making that with the help of some large industry entities an industry standard, we now build a full enterprise class solution, a cloud data platform for accessibility and availability solution on top of that. That is what we do, and we make it available for private clouds in different shapes and forms. You will see. We can do it also then in edge clouds. Edge is also one of those new directions and driving for even more demands. But if you do it in centralized locations or in edge locations, it's equally possible with us, of course. And soon also we will be making this available in public clouds. A lot of development taking place there. So several directions at the same time in our strategy that we take this to market. So one slide I promised you about Lightbits, the company itself. The full official name, Lightbits Labs. We tend to say, call it in the market Lightbits. As I mentioned, founded in 2016, headquarters in Israel. We're an Israel-based, well, still startup company, you can say that. All of our engineering, most of our engineering R&D takes place in Israel. But when it comes to sales and marketing, that is driven from our entity in the US, in the West Coast, in San Jose in California. That is where we also have a large office. We have sales and support 24/7, I tend to say, around the globe. So here in Europe, that is me driving that and doing that with the team here on the ground. We're in Asia Pacific, and of course have, as I mentioned, because of that entity and activity that we have in the US, obviously as well. There are some industry awards mentioned here on this slide. I'm not going intend to go over that here in great detail, but we will share the presentation later. There will be a recording. You can look up for yourself, but it's always good to have that recognition from the industry, of course. But the investors is a little bit more important, I think, and interesting to quickly have a look at. You see the logos there of our key and most prominent investors, Dell Technologies, Cisco, Micron, already end of 2018 that we could gather them. Intel Capital is also an interesting one, because 1.5 years ago they came to this group as a strategic investor, but there's more to it with Intel. It's not only the strategic investment that they're doing in Lightbits, also on their behalf, but we also have a very strong engineering collaboration with Intel. That means that currently the team has grown in 1.5 years already to 70 people at Intel site, Intel engineers, 70 Intel engineers working on a daily basis together with Lightbits engineers on making the most cost-efficient, price-performant solution that's available in the market today when it comes to storage. So based on some distinct Intel components, I can talk a little bit about that, and after the webinar, if you're more interested, we can go really deep into that, of course. Some distinct Intel components based on their, of course, Xeon CPU platform, the mainstream CPU platform currently. And also then in advancements that we make in the Lightbits software, again, that delivers the most price-performant storage solution that's available in the market today. All right, so what is it? What does Lightbits do? So now I'd like to move the lens. We talked a bit about the business and the technology trends that drive for what we're doing here at Lightbits, very high level, of course. I told you a little bit about the company, what the state is, what our investors are. But what is Lightbits? What are we doing? Well, this slide is the most simple snapshot that I can give of that. Basically, what we do we are a software company and we create software-defined storage solutions. That's where we started with. So our cloud data platform, the richness of the functions and features that we have today, it is all solidified into a software package that runs on a commodity server. At the end of this presentation, we will also show you some real life things that you can touch, solutions that you can touch with your hands, how that would look like in the real life. But this, it comes down to what is on this slide. On the right side, you see your storage servers. On the very left side, you see some application servers. In the middle, there is grayed out this standard TCP/IP network. And this is where we actually sit in. Let me explain a little bit more. So on the left, you see your application servers. That can be, and this is, you will never see it literally like this, of course, but this is some examples of some backend databases of cloud modern applications. This is not limited to this, of course, but this is only to give away and inspire you to think of what direction you can think of these database backends. You see the VMware logo in there. If you look sharply, you also see the Tanzu logo in there, VMware's implementation of containerization. The vanilla Kubernetes logo you see in there. And why do I put it in there in those application servers? These are all the platforms that we support today and support already for quite some time, actually. So both from a Linux bare metal, Kubernetes orchestrated, it's not mentioned explicitly here, but still also OpenStack. We see that moving away a little bit, by the way, but OpenStack is also natively supported from the Lightbits solution. And then also for VMware, we are certified for that solution. Also very important to keep that in mind. So we have the VMware certification for supporting that. VMware started supporting Nvme Tcp protocol October last year in their latest release, and we are certified for that part of VMware. So all of these environments, Lightbits can natively connect it to. You don't need to install anything on those application servers. No driver, no agent, nothing you need to install. It's already there. The driver is already available from ESXi. The driver is already available in the kernel of Linux, of all major distributions nowadays. So that's on the client side. You don't have to do nothing. It's already there. You can initiate an NVMe over TCP connection. In the middle, I mentioned the standard TCP/IP network. You don't need anything special there either. So no special NIC. You don't need no special router or switch. You don't need to make any arrangement. Lossless network, not necessary. Just the standard TCP/IP network that's already available from your data center. We're designed for 100 gig bandwidth, but we realize that not everybody may be on that standard already. It would be most beneficial. You get the most performance and the most technology out of our solution if you have that bandwidth available. But we do work also 50, 25, 40 gig, even 10 gig. We did a POC once with a customer a couple of years ago already with a much lower bandwidth. Again, you don't get all of the benefits from a technology perspective out of the Lightbits solution. We can do much more. That's what I'm trying to say, but it works. Standard TCP/IP network. And then on the right side, you see where Lightbits is putting all of its focus. It is on standard servers. We don't do anything with those servers. We expect NVMe drives in there. We require that. Let me put it even stronger, because what we do is deliver an end-to-end NVMe experience. So you have all of your NVMe drives pooled in those standard servers. You can we pool that, virtualize it into one big capacity pool per storage node, and then you can carve it up into any volume that you like, small, big. Currently supported up to 64,000 of those volumes from a storage cluster, minimal cluster size, 3 of those nodes only. By carving that up, what I mean is that you basically create an NVMe capacity and you transport that as a block device to the left on this slide, to your application service, to wherever you need it in the data center, just using that standard TCP/IP network. For the application server, it is as if there is an NVMe drive in those servers. So same characteristics, very high performance, very low latency. And the application server doesn't even know that it is not a local drive, that it's a network drive. The application server sees this, perceives this as if there is a local drive inside that server. That's the beauty of this whole arrangement. And then you can imagine, of course, that you can create all kinds of efficiencies. I'm going to talk a little bit more in a minute to compare that to existing deployments with existing storage systems there, and what is the difference, and what is then the benefit of doing it in the Lightbits way. As I mentioned, our software is a full enterprise class storage solution. And with full enterprise class, I mean with everything when it comes to high availability through clustering, relying on replication between the nodes, and within the nodes relying on some algorithms, erasure coding, very efficient erasure coding, or elastic rate, as we also call it, to protect for some component failures, drive failures, for instance, but also compression, multi-tenancy support. For some of our customers, primarily in the cloud service providers, a very important feature. Data services, you can imagine thin provisioning, for instance, snapshots and clones. It's all there. It's all in our solution. We can share later and talk about and look under the hood how we have implemented that, of course, how it exactly works and how sophisticated the implementation is. So, as I mentioned, let me go back this one slide and then move on. This is the general overview of what we do. Your application service using standard TCP networking. All of your NVMe storage sits in those storage clusters, separated from those compute application service. And you can now bring storage using that standard TCP network, very high IOPS, very low latency, to where you basically need it. That's the very essence. Let me offset that a little bit to some challenges, some concepts that are out there in the market. For instance, at this first slide, and I'm going to go over a few other ones in a minute. Compare it to SAN storage, classical storage area network storage, the typical array-based vendors that are out there. First of all, it has been here for ages, so I'm not necessarily want to say something really negative about it, but in this modern, keep in mind the opening that I mentioned about the ever increasing demand of getting information out of that data, and all of that processing and all of that movement of data that comes with that requires a different approach. And in SAN storage, it's clearly visible. Typically what you see in those standard currently available SAN solutions, the array-based solutions, very centralized monolithic architecture. It typically sits in one rack or maybe a few racks, but it sits there very centralized in your data center. So it limits you in scaling also. There are SAN controllers that is quite fixed. If you want to expand beyond the controller, you have to buy a new set of controllers. And apart from the fact that it is really expensive to do so, it comes, of course, with all kinds of support and maintenance contracts that you have to do. But also from a design perspective, very centralized architecture. It means that it sits there centrally in your data center. If there in that location in your data center would be a failure, the whole storage system can be lost at that very moment. It can only be maybe a switch. You need, of course, typically you need a separate networking infrastructure, fiber channel based. It can be different, of course. There are several initiatives out there, but it's always separate. You have to maintain another network for that. And then typically also some proprietary technology. You can't avoid that with most of those solutions, that it becomes very proprietary. This all increases the cost, increases the TCO massively. You don't have control in a lot of these elements in these kind of environments. That's the challenge that we see with SAN storage. So if you would compare it, for instance, then to direct attached storage, a lot of these modern applications so far, the common practice was, the best practice was to, if you have this really high performance and low latency requirements, these response times that these applications demand from storage, you just put in some local NVMe drives. And if this is only these 5 servers depicted here, works as a charm. But there is something interesting going on with these deployments when they scale. And this can already start with 10 or 15 of those servers in your environment. If you need to scale your application server environment as visible here, then inefficiencies occur. typically you only use a fraction of your NVMe drives, and then the rest of those drives is unused, and you cannot just expose that to another server. Of course, it just sits within that single server. With NVMe, it's even more interesting to not only look at the capacity, but also at the performance of those drives. It's very hard for an application server to get all of the performance capabilities out of those NVMe drives. You know, NVMe drives, single NVMe drives, 100,000, 500, 600, 700,000 IOPS. An application server, if it uses 100,000 IOPS on a local application server, it's already really something. But that means that you also have a lot of performance capacity unused in that environment. So not so efficient. You don't get you can only get a fraction back of your investment in NVMe cost in this kind of environment. So not so efficient. And also Lightbits has a response to that. You can look in a minute. I will show you that. Then the third and last concept that I want to show you that is challenging, and that is the hyper-converged infrastructure. If it is vSAN, if it is Nutanix, or maybe some other initiatives out there, it all comes down typically to this way of thinking that you have your compute and your storage on the same service as your application service. And again, if this is small scale, works as a charm, I would not be the one that recommends you to change that. But if this also scales beyond 10, 15 servers, maybe in such clusters, you see the inefficiencies already growing. If you need more compute, you have to add more storage at the same time. Typically, storage grows faster than compute, the demands and the needs in your environment. So if you add more storage, you have to add also CPU. Very costly, very inefficiently. We believe that it is much more efficient, and we can not only believe that, but we can calculate that, we can do the business case, that growing storage from compute separately is a much more efficient way of doing that. Also, this leads then to higher TCO, just like the two other concepts that I just showed you. So what we believe is the solution concept is the way we have now designed it and brought to market and implemented it like Lightbits. Pooling all of that NVMe capacity into these separate services I showed you before, and then carving that up into volume, any size, a number that you would like to provision in your environment, and serving that as block devices to wherever you need it in the data center. Just using standard TCP/IP network. I cannot repeat that enough. So capacity, performance, utilization increases significantly. You can scale compute and storage separately now, truly separately, and all of these benefits that I just also talked about from a technology perspective to you in this sense. Okay, so how do our customers then, if I move the lens a little bit here, how do our customers perceive the benefits that you can get from Lightbits? So I talked a little bit about the technology and why it is here. Now I would like to show you a little bit how customers that we have around the globe, how they perceive this. And that's basically on three elements here. That's efficiency, simplicity, and agility. Efficiency is primarily coming from the technology that we have, as I mentioned, based on a very high performance, very low latencies that we can deliver. The fact that we are truly disaggregated makes it also very efficient. I've shown you that basically in the previous slide already. The simplicity comes from that we are software defined, fully API driven architecture with a lot of these enterprise data services on top of that, the enterprise class storage solution that we deliver, and all based on standard infrastructure. You can truly separate out now buying your hardware infrastructure from your software. And the last one that I want to mention here is agility. And that has to do with that scaling and the way you can deploy Lightbits in your data center. Remember that I told you the challenge that you have with, for instance, SAN infrastructures, very centralized in your data center. The Lightbits solution, the minimum size I mentioned to you is 3 nodes. You can now scale it up to 60 nodes, soon to 64. You can install and implement these nodes all across your data center or even between data centers. And that makes it really, really, really flexible, but also very agile to scale up to scale out your environment. Scale up, scale out. I want to make the difference here. You can start very small with the Lightbits solution. As I mentioned, the 3 nodes is then the minimum to benefit from all of the high availability functions that we have in there. But you can start small with only a few NVMe drives, add more capacity later in those same nodes. It still works. It's still adding more capacity, of course, to your environment, to what you would need. If you need more beyond those nodes, of course, you can then scale out, add more bandwidth, add more performance to your cluster. So those are the very flexible and very agile elements that we can provide. Of course, I mentioned before, I repeated here, VMware, Kubernetes, OpenStack, bare metal. We can do it all, and we can do it all from one single cluster. So you can have both your volumes for VMware, as well as volumes for Kubernetes, as well as volumes for bare metal. It all comes from one single Lightbits cluster, one single cluster that you have to manage. And here below, yeah, you see a few of our hero numbers, up to 50% lower TCO. I try to be very conservative here. I have customers that did calculations, and on a 5-year TCO, they came even up to 70, 80, or even 90% lower TCO. That's really massive, the benefit that you can get out of that. Up to 75 million IOPS, very low latencies. Yeah, this is to give away, if you ask me, if we talk high performance, what is performance? Well, I will be very honest with you. Of course, I fully realize there is no single application in this world that requires 75 million IOPS at once. That's of course, but that's also not what we try to say here with this. It is all about, let's say, you have this big pile of options, of horsepower that is built into your data center, and you can have a lot of these parallel activities connecting to this environment. The bandwidth is there, especially if you would use 100 gig networking. And these are, by the way, not calculated numbers. These are benchmark numbers. So this is of course in the most optimal way. But I want to give away here. I want to give you a flavor of what we are doing there. So this is typically how customers perceive the benefits. If we zoom in a little bit with this one slide about private cloud deployments, we see typical use cases, challenges, and then the benefits that Lightbits would bring to that. That is what we express here with this slide. Typically, they need high performance multi-tenant block storage environments. That is private cloud environments that we talk about with many of our customers. That can be bare metal, VMware, OpenStack, or Kubernetes environments. It's all equal in that sense. And then what businesses are saying then is, we want to reduce IT infrastructure cost, but they never want to reduce, of course, the potential and the capabilities that they have in there. They want to deliver reliable services. Current infrastructure is getting older and older, and technologies are not sufficient anymore. So how do we deal with that and keep things also at the same time manageable, relatively simple? Well, that is what Lightbits has to offer: reduction of TCO, get the most out of your investments that you do in these infrastructure components. A secure, reliable, multi-tenant storage solution, data storage solution, quality of service, all of these elements. There's much more detail to explain to that to you. So this is, you can read this also on your own later, if you like, at your own pace, for your own convenience. We will share the slide deck, as I mentioned before. So again, talking about performance, but a little bit more based on more complex benchmarks. And I'm not going over each single detail here, but this gives away a little bit of the performance benchmarks that we have performed. We have done this in many POCs with customers. 3 storage servers, 24 Linux clients that we have put on there. With Linux clients, I mean 24 Linux-based application service. And these, on the right side, you see some different workloads that we have tested there, different block sizes, different ratios between read, write. For the techies, this is really interesting to have a look at. I remember one conversation we had with one customer when we were testing this. He thought that this was very interesting up front, and all the theory was nice to him, but he said, well, let's put it to the test. So we set up a test environment, and after having this installed and putting this in place, he came back to us and he said, yeah, I saw a lot of performance, and I'm not used to getting performance from storage solutions typically like this. So initially I thought I was making a mistake. So I went over my test scripts over and over again, but there was no mistake in that. This is truly the performance that we saw. Small anecdote, but this is what happens when customers start using the Lightbits solution and deploying that and testing for themselves. And I would highly encourage you of course, also to do that. So also this is talking about then Lightbits for VMware specifically. The enterprise strategy group, they wrote a white paper about using Nvme Tcp, and then with the Lightbits solution also in mind there, what the benefit of that is in bringing that to a VMware environment. And it is truly massive what we do there. And the reason why I want to bring up this slide to you today and talk about this is not necessarily about each in detail. You can also read it for yourself later. But the message here is also that we can open up new directions for VMware environments based on the fact that we truly can deliver a lot of this technology, a lot of performance, low latencies to these kind of environments. And I think that is really interesting for those customers that do use VMware and want to continue on that journey. If they do it native in VMware or want to use like they did it historically, or want to use Tanzu, offering a storage solution, what Lightbits has to offer with this high performance and low latency and all of the high availability that we still guarantee as a separate storage solution outside of the VMware environment, and making that available there. Yeah, that is really opening new ways. New kinds of modern cloud applications now can also land then on a VMware environment in the most solid way. That is what we have to offer also to these kind of environments. So this slide, basically, if you look at Lightbits, what are the environments? You saw already some of these logos appearing here and there in previous slides. Again, most of it we talked about. If it is edge cloud, public cloud, private cloud, the orchestration and the management layers that you have put in place. Even some customers we work with some homegrown environment. Remember, the Lightbits solution is fully API, RESTful API based. So the way you open it up, you want to configure it, you want to manage, monitor it, get information, metrics out of it. It's all API driven. So basically you can stick and glue it into every environment that also is fully RESTful API driven. That is what we've done many times before. And it comes also down then to these application environments. We're not necessarily integrating deeply in these application environments, but what the common theme here is this is historically open source based, at least relying on Linux platforms. And as long as it is there, Nvme Tcp is already there for many years. So yeah, this is also to inspire you and think also about your own environments. Where would you like to unleash the potential and the power that the Lightbits solution has? Nearing the end of the presentation, but I want to show you also a real life example of where we currently are for quite some time already, actually, in production environments. So we have this work that we have done with a Germany-based, probably most of you know, of course, of this, FITS in the south of Germany. The cloud-native team is building an infrastructure as a service. You see the picture on the right is basically derived from them. This is the stack, the overview of that design, that architecture that they bring to market. Basically, it's an infrastructure as a service fully based on Kubernetes, and they have developed fully automated systems around that in order to provide a full containerized stack to their end customers. That is relying using compute. The networking environment is fully integrated, and part of that is what they have done. And they turn to Lightbits to integrate our capabilities, our software, also in that environment. I think one of the most interesting parts of that is that the way Lightbits integrates, the fully API-driven platform that we are, and the way we can integrate in this whole orchestration layer natively, We have been working with them to do so, of course, and that already helps. The language that we speak, the language that their DevOps teams speak is the same. So that is a natural integration. On the other side, this also allows them to build a very cost-efficient platform, of course. That's also important because in the end, you need to sell this service to your end customers. And this is also what the Lightbits solution makes possible, to drive down those costs, keep them containable, make the business case work. That's, I think, also a very important element of this specific use case. We've created a white paper of this and a video. It's free to download, and you can look into more detail what we have done. Yeah, this is also what I wanted to leave behind to you as one of the real life customer cases in the field. So to sum it all up quickly, what is the Lightbits differentiation? Well, I've tried to explain that in this high level overview to you today, what we are, why we are here, what is the benefit, what can you expect from the solution. It's all based on bring your own hardware, if I want to say it popularly. Yeah? So standard x86 hardware, that is what we need. We don't do anything with the hardware. We have some recommendations, of course, and what we would expect in there to drive for those results and performance that we can deliver, but that's what it is. All of the functionalities, it comes from what we call an intelligent flash management layer, IFM. You will see that more often in conjunction with the Lightbits brand. That is what we bring to market. All of the functions, enterprise class functions that I mentioned, come from that layer. That's the core of what we bring with our software solution. Don't touch the network. No special arrangement need to be made. No special hardware, no special NIC, no special switches. Just the standard TCP/IP networking is enough. And then it comes down to how we're a fully based target side solution. What we mean by that is that all of our focus and attention in developing and moving forward this solution is based on those storage servers. So you don't need to do anything on the client side, nothing on the application side. It's all done on the centralized cloud data platform that we provide. So this concludes, for the large part, my part of this presentation, apart from opening up for some Q&A. But before doing that, I'd like to hand over to Norbert. Norbert, can you talk a little bit about the offerings that Lightbits and Boston do together?
Yes, of course. I switch in German. It's a little bit easier for...
Yeah, sure. Of course. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Guten Morgen nochmal, ganz kurz. Ja, wir arbeiten mit Lightbits zusammen. Und zwar, wie sind wir zusammengekommen mit Lightbits? Eigentlich über ein Projekt im Endeffekt. Ein Projekt, wo wir gemeinsam mit Lightbits ein POC machen. Namhafter Kunde im Endeffekt aus dem süddeutschen Bereich. Wenn ich den Namen sagen würde, kennt wahrscheinlich jeder. Kann ich leider nicht drüber sprechen, weil das Projekt noch am Laufen ist. So sind wir im Endeffekt zu Lightbits gekommen. Gemeinsam arbeiten wir an dem POC und wie hat mein Techniker so schön gesagt, der die ganzen Tests macht, wow, da ist richtig Dampf dahinter. Das waren die ersten Worte von ihm. So sind wir eigentlich zusammengekommen, haben dort dann auch eine Maschine definiert, gemeinsam mit Lightbits, und ich würde dich bitten, Kaipi, bitte Seite weiter.
Ja.
Genau. Wir haben dann eine Maschine genommen und wie Sie wissen, arbeiten wir sehr eng mit Supermicro zusammen. Klar, haben wir Supermicro als Basic verwendet, haben die entsprechend aufgebaut, dass wir auch die Performance transportieren können. Nichts Besonderes, eigentlich eine Maschine, wie sie bei Ihnen bereits heute im Rechenzentrum stehen könnte. Sie sehen es hier, wir haben hier im Endeffekt nicht mal die größten CPUs drinnen in diesem POC. Wir sind da sehr, sehr flexibel, können entsprechend auf den Kundenbedarf eingehen. Das Entscheidende ist einfach nur die Kombination, die daraus entstehen soll. Das ist eigentlich das Wichtigste, damit dass wir auch diese Leistung entsprechend durchbringen. Eine Seite weiter, bitte. Genau. Ich fasse einfach noch mal ganz kurz zusammen. Hier sieht man im Endeffekt, so wie die Maschine aussieht, so wie wir es definiert haben in diesem POC. Wir arbeiten hier mit 4 Nodes. Wir haben noch nicht alle Einschübe entsprechend bestückt. Das war jetzt in dem jetzigen POC noch nicht der Fall. Also wir hätten da auch noch Platz im Endeffekt, um das entsprechend zu erweitern. Und wie Sie gehört haben, setzen wir im Endeffekt ja das Storage über alle Laufwerke drüber. Das heißt, es wird ein großer Pool, sodass man dort sehr effizient im Endeffekt das Ganze erweitern kann. Das Ganze ist simpel, flexibel. Sie haben höchste Performance. Sie haben wahrscheinlich die Werte gesehen. Diese Werte werden teilweise noch übertroffen in unserem POC. Wir haben wirklich im TCO-Bereich relativ geringen TCO und das ganze System ist hoch verfügbar. Bloß damit, dass Sie mal so einen Eindruck bekommen, also wir haben ungefähr in dem Fall jetzt so einen Kostenblock, der liegt so roundabout bei 20.000 Euro. Gut, das kommt immer auf die Definition drauf an, wie viel habe ich Netzwerkkarten drin, welche Strukturen habe ich im Endeffekt, die ich anpassen muss. Anhand von diesen Faktoren sind logischerweise auch dann die Kostenblöcke dahinter. Ja, das war eigentlich so, wie wir gerade jetzt im Augenblick an diesem POC arbeiten, damit Sie ein bisschen Eindruck bekommen, was kann man machen, wie es bei Ihnen aussieht im Detail. Da würde ich Sie einfach bitten, Ihren Bedarf uns kurz zu schicken. Lassen Sie uns darüber sprechen im Endeffekt. Wir machen das sehr individuell. Es gibt bei uns kein 0815, sondern Sie kennen die Posten als Individualisten. Das heißt, wir planen gemeinsam mit Ihnen die richtige Lösung für Ihren Kunden. Das wäre unser Angebot. Testen Sie uns, kommen Sie auf uns zu. Gemeinsam können wir im Endeffekt das Ganze wesentlich einfacher gestalten. You want to speak the last words, KMP?
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you, Norbert, and great to also share that overview. And as I mentioned at the beginning, that is indeed these solutions is. This is the most tangible as it can get. These are real servers. This is where the software runs on. It's always good to have an insight in that as well. How does it look like in real life? So basically, to finish this off very quickly, talking about next steps and give you some idea of what direction we can take this. We can first and foremost of all, of course, we can do a technical deep dive. I touched upon some very high level elements in there, but I can very much understand that you want to understand a little bit more from the technology. How is it implemented? How secure is it? How solid is it? Well, I can assure you we have a lot of information about that, of course, to explain that first and foremost of all. We can also do a demonstration. You can experience Lightbits in action in that sense then, I encourage you just to reach out about that. We can combine the two with the deep dive and the demonstration. And you can also test it, of course, in your own environment. That can be in several ways. I encourage you to start looking at our website. And again, these slides are shared, so also these links to look at the self-drive proof of value that you can do yourself. We have a whole script and explanation how that would work. But of course, also me and my team are more than willing and more than ready to also help you and discuss what are the things that you would like to see from Lightbits. What is it what we typically do with others? We can do it with Boston also, of course, in the lab. There is a lot of value that we can drive from there. So let's talk about that. Bring it on, and we are more than happy to respond to that and make sure that you get the most understanding of what it all would mean in your specific environment. Thank you, Boston IT. Thank you, Andreas, Norbert, and the team behind you for having the opportunity to talk today. Really appreciated that. Back to you.
Okay, dann danke auch nochmal von meiner Seite aus, KMP. Ich wollte nochmal schauen, ob noch Fragen da sind. Wir würden jetzt die Q&A-Session eröffnen. Aktuell sehe ich allerdings keine. Von dem her kann ich auch einfach noch mal anbieten, kommen Sie auf uns zu, wenn Sie detaillierte Fragen haben wollen, wenn Sie mal eine Tech-Session haben möchten, eine Live-Demo, dass wir einfach zeigen können, wie das Ganze funktioniert, wie die Performance tatsächlich aussieht. Es ist sehr, sehr spannend meines Erachtens, das Thema, und wie gesagt, Sie haben jetzt immer noch die Möglichkeiten, Fragen einzustellen. Währenddessen würde ich noch die nächsten Events vorstellen. Moment, jetzt kommen Fragen. Sehr gut, sehr gut. Moment, ich mache sie mal größer. Dann gebe ich mal direkt weiter. Wie wird das Produkt denn bezüglich der Software lizenziert?
Yeah, so I can talk about it. That's very simple. We do it on a per server node based, per storage server node based, so physical server. So the examples that you saw that Norbert was presenting, if you need, the minimum is then 3 storage server nodes, so you pay only for the storage service. We are not interested in capacity, or we're not counting that, not cores, connections, transactions. Nothing is interesting for us. The only thing that we charge for is a license per storage server. It's basically a software subscription for 1 year. Discounts do apply, decent discounts I can tell you do apply when you would do it multiple year up front, but typically the minimum term is then 1 year subscription for a license on that server. If you on that capacity, you can start small with smaller capacities. If you would add more NVMe drives later, there is no need to pay additional fees on the licenses. So it's in that way, a very simple model actually that we propose. Okay.
Okay. Good. Then we have another question. I switch over to English. Erasure coding only at storage server level or at storage cluster level, or both?
No, it's currently only on the node level erasure coding. And we rely on replication between the nodes for high availability in case of a node failure. Has some very details and sophistication around it, with availability zone aware and protection groups and a lot of things that are configurable in that sense. Erasure coding on the cluster is on the roadmap. It is scheduled, and I don't know this fully by heart, but somewhere next year, if I'm recalling that correctly. We can go over a roadmap individually, of course, always. So that is on the roadmap. The reason we have looked at erasure coding to bring that forward and do that on a cluster level previously. The reason why we're now relying on replication is because of the high performance. We still now want to be in the domain of high performance, low latency. If you would do erasure coding over the cluster, that comes with a performance penalty. So again, we see demand for that. There are more customers asking for that. We are planning for that and bringing it out in future. But currently it's a roadmap item.
Okay. Sind die Fragen dadurch beantwortet worden? Ich gehe. Perfekt, ja, danke, wunderbar. Okay, dann würde ich noch, falls noch Fragen kommen, natürlich gerne einstellen. Danke für das Feedback auch nochmal. Ansonsten würde ich jetzt noch ganz kurz darauf eingehen, was Sie künftig noch erwarten wird. Wie beim letzten Mal schon etwas angekündigt, werden wir ein bisschen dann in die Sommerpause gehen. Jetzt sind sowieso erstmal in Bayern, Baden-Württemberg und anderen Bundesländern teilweise die Pfingstferien. Somit geht es hier weiter am 24.06. mit der Kioxia Microchip, wo wir einfach nochmal in das Thema SAS 24G einsteigen wollen, wie die Schnittstellen funktionieren, wie das alles technologisch aussieht. Von dem her denke ich auch nochmal eine spannende Geschichte. Und was man natürlich nicht verpassen darf, ist unser Technology Innovation Day am 14.07. in München, Neufahren, Vaterstetten im Hotel Stangl. Wir freuen uns natürlich auf Ihren Besuch. Wir starten bereits am 13. am Abend mit einem Partnerdinner, also für alle diejenigen, die schon früher anreisen. Und dann haben wir den ganzen Tag am 14.07. Programm mit, denke ich, auch sehr interessanten Technologien. Wir wollen einiges im Bereich Liquid Cooling aufzeigen, aber natürlich auch mit die Neuigkeiten unserer großen Technologiepartner, mit denen wir eng zusammenarbeiten, angefangen von Supermicro, Nvidia. Microsoft ist neu mit dabei, können wir dann auch ein bisschen weiter drauf eingehen, AMD und viele mehr. Also wir werden momentan richtig überrannt und das ist sehr, sehr positiv für uns, freut uns auch sehr. Von dem her würden wir uns natürlich auch sehr freuen, wenn Sie auch mit dabei sein werden. Und von dem her, ich schaue jetzt nochmal, es gab keine weiteren Fragen. Von dem her würde ich jetzt einfach das Schlusswort sprechen. Ich möchte mich natürlich ganz herzlich erstmal bei der Firma Lightbits auch bedanken, bei Keimpe Paulus, dass er sich die Zeit genommen hat, uns die Lösung im Detail vorzustellen. Auch nochmal ein Dankeschön an den Norbert Lindermeier, der auch nochmal mit ein paar Beispielen das ganze Projekt auch ein bisschen näher gebracht hat. Und natürlich bei Ihnen als Teilnehmer, die immer so zuverlässig mit dabei sind. Es freut uns natürlich sehr, dass unsere Serie hier angenommen wird. Und von dem her würde ich sagen, die Sonne scheint, das Wochenende naht. Einen schönen Freitag noch und danke fürs Dabeisein und wir hören uns am 24.06. mit Microchip und Kioxia wieder. Dankeschön und ein schönes Wochenende.
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you.
Dankeschön, schönes Wochenende. Tschüss.